Sarah, welcome to the show.
Hello. Hi.
I'll just warn the audience a little bit. We are chatting internationally here. There seems to be a little bit of a delay, so nobody's slow on their responses. It might just be the internet connection. Sarah, we're talking today about your film, The Fable of Isabella, which is a wonderful little horror film that blends a couple different genres. That's available on Reveel'd. It's part found footage. It's part kind of gothic horror and suspense thriller. Tell the audience, so I don't mess it up, tell our audience in your own words what the film is about and where you came up with the idea.
Okay. Well, the film, I'd say it's kind of like ended up like a magic realist type film. It's quite realistic in some ways. And it's about a writer who is trying to put together a film script. And it's a horror film story based on found footage. So he's trying to sort of recreate this sort of fictional film based on an actual documentary. So that's basically the story. The documentary, it's again is a bit of a typical sort of found footage film. A documentary crew goes off to investigate something mysterious happens to them, and the writer wants to kind of fictionalize it and find out what at the same time. So there's two themes, as he said. It's a kind of a story within a story.
Yeah, which I love. It reminded
me. That explains it.
If you ever saw the Nicolas Cage film Adaptation, where it's the writer writing himself into a story, it was like that meets the Blair Witch Project, which is the obvious callback. But Blair Witch Project happens to be one of my all-time favorite movies, so this was right up my alley.
Oh, great, good! I'm glad to hear that. Good, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
So we chatted a little bit in email about it, but you finished this right at the beginning of the pandemic. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was the idea. I sort of was thinking of the idea quite a while ago. Sort of influenced by different film, but in the end, we only actually finished editing it about 2018. Had a sort of Halloween screening, which was fun, in 2018, the first screening of the film. And then, as you know, what happened next, basically. Suddenly we were in lockdown, and it was very difficult to really, to sort of, sort of pursue anything really at that point in film and, in any sort of, any area of life. So things kind of ground to a bit of a halt, which was a shame for everybody.
It's been interesting. I've had one project that was in the middle of production that's on pause, another one that was launching. We had to pivot in the way we were going to release it because everything was suddenly at home. Definitely interesting times. I really enjoy the editing style on this film. It's very it's kind of hypnotic and sometimes cerebral. You just a really great execution on keeping the visuals interesting, because sometimes when you're working on an independent film, your job is to figure out how to defeat having a budget that's not a Hollywood budget. You have to figure out a way to make things interesting without having all the bells and whistles of Hollywood. And I found that this film, the editing, the close-ups and the dissolves and the montages and the use of sound design, what was that process like? Because I know what it's like. You shoot your film and you have this footage, but those are all your raw ingredients when you get into the kitchen of the editing room. How did you conceive or come up with the way that you wanted to visually put this film together?
Well, I think I had quite a strong idea visually how it would look. I'm a bit, I guess, like I storyboard things a lot. I mean, I think when you're working on a low budget, you have to be really well. I mean, I'm kind of like really sort of like overly over the top when it comes to planning things, scheduling things. And I'm sure if you're to any of the actors, they would tell you that, we arrived at the location, it was like, bang, this is this scene. Okay, right, next, this is this scene. We had to go through at a really rapid pace to kind of get all that footage. We shot a lot of footage in a short period of time, basically. And then I kind of storyboarded a lot of it. I had quite an idea of how visually it was going to go, but then obviously in the post-production, things kind of take off as well, and then you get some other visual kind of inspirations. And I mean, I'm quite a big Maya Deren fan. I like kind of surrealist films, so that all started like kind of coming into the story as well. Basically, a bit of surrealism and other sort of influences were visually coming into it, to make it interesting, as you say. Like when you're working
Hmm.
on a low budget, you can't really compete with the
No,
sort of
no.
you can't compete with the technology of a big budget movie. So you try to be creative in other ways, basically, to keep the audience interest.
Is this your first feature film?
Well, I had actually written another feature script and we'd started filming it, but it was too kind of ambitious. So it was a kind of science fiction film. Maybe I'll come back to it at some point. So it was kind of black and white. I mean, we've got some footage, which is actually pretty nice. Again, all shot on locations. I sort of went around, found lots of interesting locations. It's a bit of kind of like a lo-fi sci-fi film, but
Yeah.
it was too kind of ambitious for me at the time to be able to complete. So I, kind of started it and then I kind of put it to one side, exhausted. And yeah, and so kind of got re-inspired to have another go at making a feature with this script, Fable of Isabella. I thought it was, again, nothing is easy. I was going to say I thought
No.
this would be an easier an easier film to make. It wasn't, but it was more manageable than the other idea, basically. So
It's amazing how many of us start thinking, "Oh, this will be relatively easy to get a feature done." It's never even, I've made features with 2 people in a room, and it's still incredibly difficult. There's just so, and there's a real sort
yeah,
of tenacity that a director has to have, and a real endurance. It is the marathon of creative arts. You're from the day you start writing the film to the day you lock post-production and are ready to put it out into the world is an amazingly long stretch of needing, very long days, and your brain always attentive to it, to shape and constantly form things in the editing. And then you've got to take it to festivals and put it out in the world and do all the promotion. So I don't think a lot of people realize that, a director and a producer will live with a film for sometimes 4, 5, 6 years. So if you ever see us at film festivals or in interviews and we look a little exhausted about talking about it, it's like it's because we are. I think that's the truth.
exactly. Exactly. You become like, I don't want to become like a martyr to my film, but it almost feels like that. You don't want to feel that it's taken that far. But I think I was reading, was it Paul Schrader was saying that he used to sit and write his scripts with a sort of crown of thorns on his head, and I always thought, well, that's really kind of over the top. But you kind of begin to understand it after a while, basically.
Then you do it and
But
you're like, why
yeah,
is
at
my
the
head
same
hurt? Yeah, yeah.
time, yeah, yeah. It is a fantastic process, though, and I'm lucky in that I've worked with a good team.
Yeah.
So having a good team of collaborators has really lifted it and actually made it, fun actually as well. It's hard work for everyone, but it's actually, as a team effort, it's kind of, yeah, it's made it a lot more manageable, I think.
And where was the film shot?
Well, it was shot in a couple of different locations. It's set in Whitby in
Hmm.
Yorkshire, so which is like a fishing town.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so there's a lot of the location footage was actually shot there, but the interiors were shot in a beach house, but not actually in Whitby. They were shot in a beach house in Sussex on the coast. So like the exteriors, I wanted it to have that sort of the Whitby sort of feel to it, which is kind of famous for Bram Stoker and sort of Dracula. But so yeah, and it's just a really beautiful kind of like a part of the world anyway. So I wanted those exteriors, but we couldn't take the whole crew and team there for all the time. So I'm actually based in London, so I wanted to find a location interiors which is much nearer.
How
So
and
yeah,
how
so we
how
had
did you
those
go
two
about
main locations.
I was just say, what's the process of casting the
Sorry.
film? How did you find your actors? There's some stellar acting in this film.
Um, Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was very difficult to get to cast the main character, Guy.
Hmm.
John Hansler, who ended up playing the character, is absolutely brilliant, and he was just totally right for the role. But it's quite a difficult process to find him, and there was actually um, I think he was the fourth the fourth person who I tried out for the role, basically. And all the actors who we shot footage with, they were all great, but they weren't actually just quite right until we found John, basically. And he came and auditioned, and as soon as he met Chris Darrell, who plays Siobhan, the researcher, so in the film, Jonathan Hansler plays Guy, who's a script writer. He's a novelist, and this is his first script, and it's quite stressful for him writing this kind of horror script. He's like a gothic novelist, and so Siobhan comes along to help him, basically, the researcher. And when they came together and they started reading the script together, they clicked really well, and it worked well. And so to sort of finally found the right team to work together. But it was quite a process of auditioning, filming scenes, and then having to go back to square one again. So that was that was a bit of a process. With the doc crew, it was slightly different, because from the word go, they all kind of hit it off together, and it just worked because they were crew actually already. They really are a crew, so
they're crew turned cast.
They could work together. Sorry,
their crew turned cast.
Yes. Yes.
Well, that's about as authentic.
They're a real.
That's super authentic to make a found footage movie, to have them be real people. Yeah.
I mean, it kind of worked originally. I think they agreed to play the roles for a sort of promo short film, basically. Mm-hmm. We were going to do like a promo film and then sort of like raise some backing. But because they enjoyed doing it so much, they continued doing the whole script, and they actually filmed the whole script. And so that's really how it sort of continued. And then I found like the sort of professional actors to play this kind of central roles of Guy and Guy Renfield and Siobhan, who are the writer and researcher, trying to unravel and put together like a horror story for a deadline, basically. So
now, did you find? Do you have a background in theater, or did you just jump straight into filmmaking?
No, I've got a background in theatre. I actually trained to direct plays originally as a theatre director, and so I kind of was very keen on Stanislavski acting techniques, and also Brechtian acting techniques. Those are the two kind of directors' styles that I really enjoyed, and I wanted in, and I was sort of trained in, and sort of worked with actors. So I had some experience of directing plays for a while, and then by chance, it was really purely by chance, I just fell into making a film. Basically, I wrote a script which won an award to be made, and I just kind of literally fell into, by mistake, into filmmaking. And then I just really enjoyed filmmaking. I couldn't sort of stop wanting to make films after that, really. So yeah.
It's addictive.
I think
that's for sure.
Sorry.
I was saying it's addictive. That's for sure. It's addictive. Making films is addictive.
Yeah, it is. Yes.
How does that translate from directing on the stage to directing on the screen? Like, what was? Give me the biggest thing that you thought would translate easier, that was difficult, and then what skill set, having been a theater director, made it easier to transition into doing film.
Well, actually, it is actually a very different style of acting. I think because Stanislavski is about was trying to develop realism and naturalism in theatre, and so it's kind of like about techniques where the actors think the sort of like they think the event. And then that sort of comes out in their acting, rather than them sort of acting externally. So because kind of theatre is very much kind of out there, people have to express themselves to an audience which is a certain distance away. And Stanislavski acting styles are more about trying to find realism and interior kind of realism. So knowing that style was helpful, and also using Brecht. Brecht is all about casting against type. So, and again, that's actually a useful technique to use in a film. Basically, if you cast against type sometimes, or try to do that. Yeah, I think in terms of what was hard and what was easier, I think sometimes, it's difficult to judge when you're looking through a camera. We were often watching we were in the sort of room with the actors when they were acting, and they were doing a great performance. But then when I look back through the camera and watch the footage afterwards, this was no criticism of the actors, but this is how I actually did the process of elimination. Because watching it through the camera, it just didn't quite work. It worked in a live sense, as a live performance. So, I mean, acting in front of a camera is a different, as you know, it's a whole different style of acting, basically.
So
I think that was.
I was going to say, the acting styles you mentioned, I know those names and words because I'm married to an actress, but I couldn't tell you anything about it. So the way that you're explaining it, I'm like, oh, now it makes sense. And I'll be able, next time she brings it up, I'll be like, yeah. Actually, Stanislavski, I'll have something to add to the conversation instead of just staring blankly at her. That's awesome. So the film is available. We try to keep these things pretty short. So I just want to tell the audience, the Fable of Isabella is available on Reveel'd. Reveel'd is a free platform. You sign up the same as you would for any other streaming platform, but they don't ask you for a credit card. They never will. It's 100% free. Anyone in the world can be checking out the Fable of Isabella and all the other great films on Reveel'd. And once a week, I get to have a lovely chat with creators on here, and you get to hear the inside scoop about how these films are made, which is super important. So, any final thoughts, Sarah? Why should people check out your film? What's the message? What do you hope an audience will enjoy out of watching your film?
Well, I think that there's a new kind of sort of movement, really, in actually horror movies. It is a horror film, but it's also it's quite a kind of social realist type horror, and I think that makes it different. And I think there's more kind of like without kind of I don't think it sound a bit pretentious. There's more kind of serious or art house horror films out there these days. I think horror has always been a challenging genre, right from like Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which is maybe the first German expressionist horror film. So it's always been a challenging genre that I've always really liked. So I think if you like horror, but you also want something a bit different, not really what you expect, then I think you'd probably enjoy this film. It is, as you said, it's kind of cerebral without being pretentious, I hope.
Yeah. Well, I think the visual style was more cerebral. That the story is not pretentious at all. And the terms that get thrown around most are elevated horror, which I'm sick of hearing, and psychological horror has been around forever. When something isn't necessarily a gory slasher movie, it's got more of a psychological element to it. And I think your film nails that tone beautifully. So, Sarah, thank you for joining us today. Thanks for taking the time to chat about the film. And everybody out there, reveel'd.net, sign up, watch some great movies. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me on the program. Thank you. It's good to meet you.